you for spending a few minutes of your time here with me today. And wow, we're actually doing this one live. You know, we called the show iCritic Live, and typically that's because I record it live. I don't do the notes, I don't write anything down. I just go with the flow, but I don't always do it live on the internet. After I record it, I usually add the intro and, do a couple little things. There's almost no editing because I like to do as little as possible. But today we are going to be doing it live. Now, a couple things to note because of the location I'm at and because of the time of the day. It's just been one of those crazy days. If you hear dogs in the background, I live in a house with a bunch of dogs, and of course, as I sit down to start doing this, they start going crazy. Hopefully they won't bother us too much. And I'm near a freeway. So if you hear any car or loud motorcycle or something, that's what's going on right there. But anyway, let's get into the topic at hand, which is there has been a lot of controversy with Disney and ABC these days, particularly with removing indefinitely, and it will probably end up being permanent, knowing how these things where we of course, girl, now you're gonna talk, right? Like I said, dogs. This will stop it. She just doesn't like when she is not the center of attention. So sorry, folks. This is how you for those who can watch. Stop it. Stop it. Stop it. Okay, I think you're getting. I think she's learning her lesson. Sorry, I know this is like a very droll way to begin a podcast, but yeah. So anyway, Jimmy Kimmel made some comments not about recently slain, murdered, shot down Charlie Kirk, who I just want to make it absolutely clear whether I agreed with him or not, and there was a lot I disagreed with him on. That should not have happened. He should not have been killed. I condemn that. I condemn it all. And by the way, Jimmy Kimmel condemned it too on the day it happened, which seems to be part of the story that is conveniently being forgot in all of this. But a few days later, they, allegedly found the person who shot Charlie Kirk. And, well, it turned out he was not a transgender person. He did not come from a super liberal family. He did not attend a super liberal university. He was All right. I don't know what's going to happen at this point, folks. The internet is very unstable right now. I don't know why. It's been fine all day, but it's just going crazy at the moment. So we're going to try to get through with this. Comment if everything looks fine on your end. Otherwise, I have no way of knowing. And of course, the dog has to be annoying right now. But anyway, let's try to get through this. So, like I said, people were upset that were hoping that this would be. I mean, even the governor of Utah was like, please let this be someone other than like a white guy because I don't want him to be one of us. And it turned out the guy who shot Charlie Kirk was a young white man, pretty stereotypical of shooters these days. And he came from a conservative family. And while it does appear that he was leaning a little more left and may have allegedly been dating a transgendered woman, there are actually photos of him on the internet, like riding a Donald Trump statue. And, basically, for all intents and purposes, he came from a conservative, probably MAGA family. And when that information came out, of course, Jimmy Kimmel was going to joke about it. And he made a joke about how, it was, he thought it was funny how, he was going to be seeing all these MAGA people basically jumping through hoops trying to convince themselves that the shooter was not one of them. Now, technically speaking, the shooter seemed to have more liberal viewpoints. He seemed to have drifted, as they say, from what his family believed. But the bottom line is he still came from the MAGA family. That is not factually incorrect. And Kimmel did not call for violence with these comments. He was joking how, people on the far right were looking at this situation, and they were like, basically, before we even found out all the details, they were very silent, probably coming to terms. And it's like, oh, he had these different beliefs, so he's really not one of us, but he came from a conservative family. And by the way, I'm sure the dad of the family is feeling a little guilty because there are pictures of the alleged suspect with like a gun at the age of 5. Clearly he had been shooting his entire life. And, this is not to praise him or anything, but it's like, yeah, it takes a lot of skill to shoot from that distance and basically one shot kill a guy. So this person was very skilled with a gun. Now, that being said, this is what comedians do. They make jokes upon things, and sometimes they lose their jobs over making jokes. Gilbert Gottfried lost his job as the Aflac duck when he made a joke, and I'm paraphrasing. I don't have the exact quote in front of me, but it was some joke along the line of, I lost my wife in a storm, but that's okay because another one will be floating by in a minute. He also made a joke after 9/11. And by the way, Bill Maher, on a show called Politically Incorrect, made a joke about 9/11 and lost his job. Now he's on cable and doing just fine. So sometimes people, they lose their jobs, they come back, everything. It should be noted, all these are private companies. They can hire and fire whoever they want. And if this was that sort of situation, maybe this would not have gotten the outrage that it did. However, the FCC chairman, I need to look up his name real quick. I'm sorry. I think his name's Burr or Barr. But, something along that. Brendan Carr, that's his name. He went on the podcast of a right-wing person named Benny something. I'm sorry. Names are not my strong suit. You probably know this if you've been listening to my podcast for a while. I struggle with names. His name with Benny, and chances are you know who he is if you've been following the situation. But he was on this podcast, mentioned Kimmel's comments, and said that they were not in the public's interest. which I don't know why the FCC is going to make comments on jokes and saying that that's not in the public's interest. There are a lot of controversial things that happen on TV that the FCC never makes a comment about. And this seemed rather strange. And he suggested quite publicly that affiliates with Jimmy Kimmel Live should rear him in, apologize, and, do something because he felt it was inappropriate. And he said, look, they've got licenses. We grant them these licenses. We could do this either the easy way or the hard way. Now, that is an implied threat. Like, hey, you do what we say, or we will, get rid of you. We will take away your license. Now, this could be fought in court, and it can be won. This has also been pointed out. Many people have, because after these comments were made, Nexstar basically said they would not carry the show. Sinclair took it a step further, not only saying they would not air the show, they would not provide the programming to ABC affiliates. They also demanded Jimmy Kimmel, make an apology and make a substantial donation to Kirk's family and his Turning Point USA organization, which it should be mentioned, Jimmy Kimmel did not personally insult Kirk or his family or his organization. He was making fun of MAGA, which has no membership out there. It is an ideologue, like Antifa. There's no actual organization. So that felt a little, Don Corleone. And, the funny thing is, like, Kimmel's joke is actually starting to make more sense now because clearly this is a free speech issue. It's not like ABC voluntarily decided to pull Jimmy Kimmel. In fact, it's on record on a Rolling Stone article that basically no executive at Disney or ABC, or very few of them, I should say, found Kimmel's comments to be over the line or outrageous. But they were all concerned about the Trump administration basically laying the law down and taking away their license, maybe doing even more things. It should also be noted that in this situation, Nexstar wants to merge with a company called Tenga, another, station affiliate thing, which would bring their combined station ownership from like 39% to like 86%, something like that. And they will need the FCC's not only approval, but they will need the FCC to rewrite some rules for them to do that. And Disney is trying to acquire Fubo TV to bring the sports package in to their Disney Plus app and things like that. So all the companies involved, except for maybe Sinclair, have some financial stake in form of a merger or a buyout or something that they need the FCC's approval. And what we saw recently with the Paramount and Skydance deal, that, that thing wasn't going through. And then there was like a lawsuit against CBS. And even though that was a winnable lawsuit on Paramount's part, Paramount decided best to give the president $16 million, whatever it was. And then, interestingly enough, Stephen Colbert, it was announced that his show was coming to an end. And Trump celebrated on Truth Social and basically said, like, Kimmel, Fallon, whatever Sean's last name is, you're next. And everyone suspected, it was not stated, but everyone suspected that this was essentially a bribe. That, hey, they wanted a merger to go through, and this was a huge conflict of interest. We've never had a president who sues companies before while he's in office. I can't remember the last time a president has sued anyone, although I'm sure someone's going to leave a comment telling me when that was and what it was for. Heck, it might have been Obama. I don't know. It happens so infrequently is what I'm trying to say. And they saw that, hey, they made a settlement, a merger got approved, and then, oh, what do you know? One of Trump's biggest critics is fired and the president is praising it. Who knows? I don't know, look a little suspicious, don't you think? Now, this is going on, and this is where Kimmel's joke is getting really interesting, because Kimmel was joking about how MAGA would jump through hoops trying to justify that the shooter was not one of them. Now, MAGA is jumping through hoops, in my opinion, that on like how this is not an infringement of free speech. All of a sudden, many of them are going like it's a private company. They could have fought it if they wanted to, but they didn't want to because they were losing money. The ratings were sagging. They were probably always going to fire him. Trump just gave them the ammunition. I hear all that. But here's the thing. An implicit threat was made on TV. And the networks caved. Even if the networks did not cave because of that threat, you have to admit the optics are terrible under those circumstances. And the fact that there are these mergers looming overhead, mergers that should not happen, by the way, for my opinion, for my money, these mergers will create some monopolistic opportunities for all the companies involved. And this seems to be the most easily swayed administration. Like, hey, you give us some money, you maybe fire someone we don't like, and we'll let your merger go through. We'll rewrite the rules for you. And look, I don't like being political on this podcast. I really, really don't. But let's be honest, folks, that none of this feels right. And it's starting to impede on our lives and in our entertainment in ways that you almost can't avoid it. Heck, the Xbox Series consoles just got another price hike, and it's because of tariffs. It's because of tariffs. It's not because they're selling so well that Microsoft feels like they can just all of a sudden charge $800 for a gaming box. It's not. It's because of tariffs. So there has been some pretty big damage done by this administration, and that is why many people are speaking out against what is happening here, because what is happening is not right. And the situation has even gotten to the point where the former Disney CEO of Michael Eisner actually is criticizing his replacement. I know, like, we're not talking about Disney War. That was that background we made for the James B. Stewart interview, which you can listen to when you subscribe to this podcast. But considering both men were talked about in that book, it felt like an appropriate background. And, well, instead of reading this article, why don't we read the actual post itself? Maybe we can make this a little bigger. Where Michael Eisner, and by the way, Eisner had not posted on social media for a while, so he basically came out of social media retirement to say this. He said, "Where has all the leadership gone? If not for university presidents, law firm managing partners, and corporate chief executives standing up against bullies, who then will step up for the First Amendment? The quote-unquote suspending indefinitely of Jimmy Kimmel immediately after the chairman of the FCC's aggressive yet hollow threatening of the Disney company is yet another example of out-of-control intimidation. Maybe the Constitution should have said, Congress shall make no law abridging the freedom of speech or of the press, except in one's political or financial self-interest. By the way, for the record, this ex-CEO finds Jimmy Kimmel very talented and funny." Now, it was fun to actually watch a lot of conservative Eisner apologists on the internet kind of melt down over this because, like, I'm not going to say every Eisner apologist is a super big conservative, but a lot of them are. And there's a couple that have actually blocked me, but of course, thanks to X's new rules, I can still read their posts. And they're just having meltdowns. Like, how can someone I look up to have this way? And they're jumping through the hoops. I almost considered sharing a couple of them, but I won't because I don't want to give them any more oxygen than what they already have in terms of their online presence. Now, it's amazing that this situation has gotten to the point that it has. And keep in mind, Disney's kind of found themselves in a little bit of hot water before. There was that whole don't say gay thing where former CEO Bob Chapek at first didn't want to get involved. And then when he was pressured to get involved, he way overstepped what the statement probably should have said, and basically got the Reedy Creek district that Disney controlled in Florida retaken over by the government. I don't think that's worked out particularly well for anyone, because they were dealing with a very petty governor in Florida who just did not want to be told what to do. All right. So Disney has found itself in these situations, and Bob Iger used to stand up to the Trump administration, the first one, but ever since he came back, he's kind of been capitulating more and more, looking at his business deals. I think at one point Iger wanted to run for public office. Now that that's not actually going to be a thing, he's basically chosen not to do that. Now, I think it's funny that Michael Eisner is making the statement, not because I disagree with it. I actually very much agree with it. I'm saying I think it's funny that he's getting involved because I don't think he's really in the position to be making this comment. And this is why. Some of you may have figured that this was coming soon, but in 1997, Martin Scorsese made a movie for Disney called Kundun. And this is one of his more underappreciated films. It's probably one of his lesser seen movies, although there's pretty good reason for why, and we'll talk about that in a second, which was a biographical film about the 14th Dalai Lama, the exiled political and spiritual leader of Tibet. Now, the whole Dalai Lama and Tibet thing is a very, let's say, touchy subject in China. When Brad Pitt and David Thewlis made 7 years in Tibet for Sony Pictures, they actually were banned from China for I don't know how many years, but they couldn't go back to China. So that was a thing. But Disney was going, well, they weren't going to. They did release this, and the Chinese government was angered by this film, and they threatened to block Disney movies from the Chinese marketplace. Now, at first, Eisner publicly defended the decision and said that they wouldn't bow to a country's desires, which people were actually praising Eisner for. Like, yay, this is good. This is a CEO of a company stepping up, saying, no, we will not be censored by an oppressive Chinese government. That being said, the Chinese market was still pretty big. Disney was also making an animated movie called Mulan at the time. They were really hoping that would be big in China. They had their sights set on expanding in China. So, this little Kundun movie could really ruin those plans. And Michael Eisner publicly apologized to them. And he even said that it will barely open, talking about the movie, and it will die a quiet death, which sure enough, it did. It made less than $6 million on a $28 million budget, although it did get 4 Oscar nominations. And where is the movie now? Well, here's the thing. If you want to watch it now, you pretty much can't watch it. It's not on a subscription service. You can't even buy it digitally. Interestingly, if you're in South Korea, you can stream the thing on Crunchyroll. That's interesting. You want to know how you can watch this movie? You have to buy the Blu-ray of it. And by the way, Disney didn't even make this Blu-ray. Kino Lorber, if I could get it close enough, I don't think I could do it, but Kino Lorber actually was the one who released this on Blu-ray. So that's the only way you can get it now. I don't even know if this thing's still in print, to be perfectly honest. So I have like a digital shelf on my Fandango at Home account dedicated to Martin Scorsese, and Kundun is one of the films that's not there, along with The Irishman, because it's just not available to purchase digitally. So I will admit that it seems really rich that Michael Eisner is making these comments when he buckled to censorship pressures before. But again, he's not wrong, because I don't care if you did not like what Kimmel had to say. He was not calling for violence. No matter how you try to spin it, he was not calling for violence. He was making fun of MAGAs jumping through hoops to justify that the shooter was not one of them. Whether there's an implication that, I don't personally think that alone indicates that, the joke suggested that all MAGA people were shooters and things like that. I don't believe that. He did not make fun of Charlie Kirk himself. Again, a few days before, he actually condemned the shooting of Charlie Kirk. But it's just so fascinating to see what is happening, because here's the thing. If the FCC did not get involved, I don't think this would be the big issue it was. I really don't. In fact, Mike Pence and Rand Paul even made similar comments. They commented, no one is owed a job. If you make some jokes that your employer does not like, they do have the right to fire you. But they both commented, but we really do not feel that the FCC should have gotten involved. And by the way, on Truth Social, Trump said that Kimmel and Sean, whatever his name is, were next. He's not going to stop. You capitulate to this bully, he's going to keep doing it. He's going after the comedians that make jokes about him first, and he's using the FCC to do it. And this is not the FCC's job. Saying that this joke is not in the public's interest, you know what? There are so many comedians that have been challenged for their edgy jokes. George Carlin, Chris Rock, Liza Lampanelli, I believe is what her name is. There are some edgy comedians who have faced scrutiny from, the government that says we do not feel those jokes are tasteful and things like that. But here's the thing. They're protected under the First Amendment. Now, I want to bring this back to Charlie Kirk. I really wish that I had written this down. I had pulled this up in advance, so I'm sorry. This is one of the things that I really should have pulled up in time. So where what I don't like? I don't like when you look up an article and it says what you need, but then you need to scroll through all these words just to even get to the point that you want to cite. Come on. This is there's got to. Okay, here's what this is what Charlie Kirk himself said, because of what's going on. They're saying like this is hate speech or it's not protected or things like that. This is what Charlie Kirk himself said on X in May of 2024. Hate speech does not exist legally in America. There's ugly speech. There's gross speech. There's evil speech. And all of it is protected by the First Amendment. I wanted to highlight this. I fully agree with that statement. I fully agree with that statement. That I think is a very true statement. And it's ironic that activists in the government are using Kirk's death to try to go after their critics and to silence speech that they consider to be hateful, because Kirk himself would not be in favor of that. Kirk himself would speak against that. Because here's the thing, as much as I disagreed with Kirk, he did say some things that I agreed with once in a while, and his views that speech should be protected at all costs, I believe is one of those things. So this is a very ugly situation, and we're going to have to see what happens with Jimmy Kimmel. I don't think Disney is in a very good position at the moment, because they should, in my opinion, fight this. They should reinstate him, and they should take the FCC and the affiliates to court for trying to censor free speech. They should fight it. they would win. The Supreme Court has already made it very clear with all that's been going on that they are going to uphold the First Amendment rights to free speech. But to do that, they would have to give up these mergers. They would be angering their Nexstar and Sinclair affiliates. I mean, basically, business will be hurt. I don't know if Jimmy Kimmel makes enough money. He probably doesn't, to compensate for the lack of that income that would be coming from those affiliates. So they're put in a really bad situation, and I just do not know what I would do in that situation. I do believe this is a damned if you do, damned if you don't situation. At the end of the day, I am always going to be on free speech's side. That is what I will always be on the side of. And I hope that's how it works out, but we just don't know, because unfortunately, while the threats of Brendan Carr are hollow because they can beat him in court, who wants to spend the money to do that? Especially when that this administration, you send them a check, you say, I'm sorry, you kiss the ring, you say, we'll fire this person, you'll never hear from them again. That is so much easier, so much cheaper. And guess what? In favor of doing so, maybe they give you a favor. Maybe they overlook some complications with a merger that they otherwise wouldn't overlook. You know what I'm saying? So this is just not a good situation. I really wish we didn't have to even talk about this. And of course, I wish Charlie Kirk were alive. Just sharing his opinions that you could either agree with him or disagree with him. And this whole thing that, when people go like, well, what about Charlie Kirk's amendments, which he no longer has because he's dead? You know what? Charlie Kirk believed in those amendments, and he fought for them. He would be so ashamed of all you MAGA people trying to silence Jimmy Kimmel for that. By the way, some of you are blaming South Park for getting him killed because South Park made fun of him in an episode like several days before he died. Charlie Kirk loved the South Park episode. He even used the Cartman as Charlie Kirk avatar as his picture for a few days. He loved that appearance on South Park. So I think a lot of terrible things are now being done in Charlie Kirk's name. I think he would be ashamed of most of what's happening. And it's a scary time right now. And I hate talking about politics on this podcast. I really wish I wasn't. But here we are. And I don't think this is going to be the last time I'm going to talk about it either. Shoot, I want to talk about the damage that's going to happen with like a potential Netflix and Warner Brothers merger. That's what I'd rather be talking about. But a topic like that will have to be saved for another day. In the meantime, if this is your first time here and you like what you hear, please don't get used to it. I'm hoping we don't have to talk to it about this stuff very long. But if you happen to like what you heard and you want more and you want to hear some of our other episodes, let's make it official. Subscribe to the podcast. We are on Spotify, Apple, Deezer, and YouTube, and anywhere podcasting platforms are. If you are listening to this where there is a platform that leaves a comment, I would love to hear your comment about any of this, as long as it's civil. And as always, blame responsibly. Have a good one.